Today I'm going to show you how to make a wax-hardened leather vambrace for sport fighting, so let's get started. Just a reminder everybody that you can find this pattern as well as many others and artwork on my Etsy shop. You can find a link right here. You can also find that same stuff on my Patreon account month to month. It refreshes every month, so have a look at that. And hell, if you want to support the channel even more, I've got shirts I've designed linked below the video. Hey, this is one of them right here. I'm biased, but I love this shirt. Check it out. Let's get started. As I was saying, you can find this pattern on my Etsy shop. We're just going to go through cutting it out and punching all the holes. I'm using an 8 to 12 ounce leather on the upper parts of the arms, and I'm punching out all these holes with a 5/64 inch punch. The holes are spaced, so the 4-in-1 punch that I often use works with this, but I just fired around it really quick with that 5/64 inch punch. Any rivet holes that I punch are usually 1/8 inch drive punches, and that's because I'm usually using 1/8 inch rivets, either brass or copper. Now, if you're using rapid rivets to put these together, which is fine, you may want a slightly smaller hole. Because I layer these vambraces, I usually use a 12 ounce leather. It says 12 to 14 there, but I would try and do 12. You don't want it too heavy that it doesn't form nicely. Just a heads up that I released this pattern on my Etsy and Patreon about a week before I released this video, so if you're looking to stay up to date on all the patterns that I release, I'm probably going to end up putting them up on my Etsy and Patreon before the video's done. Again, I'm just going to fly around the edge here with that 5/64 inch punch. Now all we have to do is cut out some straps. Again, the rivet holes are going to be 1/8 inch, but the holes for the buckle tongue are going to be 5/32. So I've got 5/64 inch for the stitch holes, 1/8 inch for the rivet holes, and 5/32 for the buckle holes. There you go. Now that we've got the paper pattern complete, it's time to start cutting some leather out. My go-to place in town here is LONSDALE Leather, so I get almost all my tools and supplies from them, so you should check them out if you have some time. There'll be a link here and in the description down below for you. Now I'm using an 8 ounce leather here. Once again, this says 8 to 12, but I like to air everything slightly on the lower side. For me, 12 ounce leather on the upper plates for these arms wouldn't be as big of a deal as a 14 ounce leather for the lower piece. So if you've got a 12 ounce for the upper pieces, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now when it's time to start cutting all of this out, the 8 ounce is one thing, but this 12 ounce is going to be quite a pain in the butt. Make sure you strop your blade repeatedly. Even if it's a fresh knife blade, always strop it. You'll get an extra edge on it. And that'll help me cut through all this pretty quick, as you can see here. When I'm beveling all of these, I'm using a number 2 beveler, and then when I get onto the heavier leather, I use a number 3. I've got a pretty good tip on how to sharpen your bevelers that are finally giving up the ghost, so I'll link it here if I'm able to. Videos are only allowed so many inserts for links, so I may not have enough, but you can definitely find it in my video list. A stitch groover isn't absolutely necessary, but it'll definitely help protect your stitches. If I had not had all the holes all pre-designated, then I could stitch groove and punch along with diamond punchers or my 4-in-1 and be able to track everything well, but because I already have the holes there, I just went over it so it would protect the stitches. So some of this takes a few passes to get through. Make sure you strop your blade again and then strop it again, even if it's brand new. Like I was saying before, it'll really help you cut through this heavy leather. This is a 12.5 ounce, I think, if I remember correctly. Again, I'm using a number 3 beveler for this heavier hide. It works pretty good. You could go up a little higher if you wanted to, but I thought the 3 was a good spot. This video has a few things like this, so I would totally throw out this whole piece because of this groove. But I just thought I would leave it in because it goes to show you always got to double check your hides. I should have checked the back of this, and I can't ship that to a customer with a giant groove in the back like that. On top of that, it may hit the wax and warp because it's got a different thickness than the rest of the hides, so you're playing with fire if you put everything together and then go ahead and wax it. So I was crossing my fingers that everything would turn out okay. I'm using 5/8 inch buckles here, and I could have used a strap cutter, but decided to just cut it with my blade and a ruler. Everything turned out fine. Having silver pens on hand is pretty handy for black. We know here we're going to have the rivet holes be 1/8 inch,
and the tongue holes for the buckle be 5/32 inch. Obviously you need 2 of each of these to complete your one arm. Now we're going to make some keepers. Most of you are going to want to stitch these together, but you're just going to wrap it around both pieces and check the size. You're just going to mark it with a stylus or however you want to mark it, then you're going to cut it. Now what I do is I cut 2, so I cut the one that I'm going to put together and then the one that makes sure I know the size. So if this one was wrong, then I would just get rid of the second one. But because it's fine, I'm going to use the second one either to make more, or I'm going to just put the second one together. Now this is a great little stapler. I've been using it since I worked on Warcraft, and all you just got to do is tap the staples a little bit to make sure they're secure. Bunch of 1/8 inch punches for these upper parts. We're going to go around the edge with the 4-in-1 and the 5/64 depending. So on the corners, obviously, I'm using the 5/64 because the 4-in-1 can't get to there. I've had both my 5/64 inch and my 4-in-1 punch for a while now, so it's almost time to get a new set of those. Because of that, I tried something different with this piece and took the heavier leather over to the drill press. Because of how firm and thick this leather is, I felt it would be alright, and it was. Now obviously most of you aren't going to have a drill press, so you can use your 5/64 inch or your 4-in-1 just fine. Probably it'll be easier to use your 5/64 on this heavier leather. If you're having trouble punching those holes with the drive punch, push the tip into some beeswax to get some lubrication.
Now that you have it all cut out, it's time to add some artwork if you want to. Now, if you're going to add artwork to a piece that is going to be waxed, you have to let it dry at least 24 hours. If you don't, you're going to put it into the wax, and if it's still wet, you're going to absolutely destroy, no recovery, destroy your piece. So make sure you're careful. Let's get going.
Remember that bit of advice I just gave you because it'll come into play later. So I've decided to sketch a Thor's hammer with a serpent wrapped around it. I'm trying to expand on my art skills. The only way to do that is practice. I'm pretty good with the serpents, but serpents aren't really that difficult. They're a squiggly line that's got nice curves that you just double up. So if you're looking to do your own artwork, don't be afraid. Just keep practicing and playing around with it. Be patient. So I'm just going to sketch this up, then I'm going to ink it, and then we're going to move on to leather carving. So I'll see you in a little bit here. I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. If you want to improve your artwork and make it look just that much better, grab some inks. It really adds just that extra level of finish. I've got lots of videos on leather carving, but I'm just going to mention this quickly. When you are wetting your leather, it's okay to put a bunch of water on it, but you definitely have to let it dry a bunch before you carve it. So, otherwise you're just going to get really awkward looking lines when you finally hit it with your swivel knife. I'll link a video here if you want to check out some more information on leather carving. You can also find all sorts of leather carving tools in my Amazon storefront. You can check the link in the description down below. Enjoy the process here, and I'll catch up to you guys when I finish this part. Alright, I need everybody to pay attention for a quick second. Teaching time. So, when we draw back to see this full piece, you're going to see that there's a wet spot at the bottom and the top of our carving. If you recall what I said earlier about 24 hours after carving, well, remember this for when we put it in the wax later, because this build was all done on the same day. We know this whole piece is wet, but if you look right here, you can see those two moisture spots. So if you're waiting for your piece to dry, you know that those two spots need to dry the most. You know, like 24 hours. To make your carving pop the most, you're going to want to paint with dyes or use some paints in general. Being very careful with the black so it doesn't get all over the place. It could easily bleed onto your piece. Now you can fix this up a bit with antique gels and blend it a bit better. And that's what I'm going to end up doing here. So I'm not putting a resist on my piece at all. I'm just going to use an antique gel to make sure I get it in all the little crevices and darken everything before I paint it. If given the option between paints and dyes, I'll usually take dyes, but because this is a tutorial video, I thought I would experiment with some painting this time around. Now, your paint is going to resist the wax, so it won't darken like a dye will, but it'll still discolor slightly, or at least has the chance of discoloring slightly. But it definitely won't be as drastic a change as when you put a dyed piece of leather in a wax pot. Even a natural Vegetan color will go a very dark brown. And that's before you've even applied any dyes to it. So if you're going to want a dark brown Vambrace, definitely don't put any brown coloring on it. Just let the wax take care of it. I've also experimented with using resists and dyes and antiques and then waxing it. But it's such a hit and miss process for quality. Once you've tooled a piece, not only is there a whole bunch of spots where the wax could seep in, even with a resist on it, it could even seep in through the sides or the back or the stitching holes and discolor your piece. So if you have a resist on it, it's definitely going to resist in certain spots of your project, but in other parts it won't. So you're going to get a mottled, awkward looking, unfinished piece. Once we've got this all done, we're going to dye this other piece really quickly, and then we're going to break out some wax and burnish all our edges. Now, you can use water, saddle soap, a variety of different burnishing tools, including motorized ones, bone folders, all sorts of different options. I like this one here, but more often than not I'll use my motorized burnisher. Once you've burnished all your edges, make sure you give it a quick buff to get rid of any marks or excess wax bits. This is more important on pieces that aren't going to be waxed, obviously. Now, everybody's favorite thing in the world, hand stitching. I am not a professional hand stitcher. There's lots of people that have different techniques. I use a sewing machine when I stitch things usually. So this channel is making me do more hand stitching than I have ever done in the last 10 years. But it's more important, I think, to make sure you guys see it done, know that it's not that hard, and that all my patterns make it so that you can hand stitch them. So it's a learning process for me, it's a learning process for you guys as well. I was a little worried about this piece because, as I've said before, 24 hours after you carve it is the minimum for when you should wax it. So I've had it resting on top of my wax pot's lid, just being nice and warm and trying to make sure it's totally dry before I put it in the wax. Spoiler alert, I was unsuccessful in making sure it was completely dry. But hey, we've got all this stitched up, now it's time to put it in the wax. I used to use a mix of beeswax and paraffin wax, now I just use a high melt point paraffin wax. Be safe when you're doing it. Use a ventilated space with a crock pot. Never move any kind of wax-filled object when it's melted. I don't care how safe you think you're being. Make sure you leave a timer on. All sorts of stuff. I put it in the wax at 250 degrees Celsius for 3 minutes. Now, this is not 250 degrees Celsius. I figured it would be fine. It's 300 degrees Celsius, and as we know from my comments previously, it's got some moisture content still. I'm not impressed with the 300. I'm thinking to myself I should pull it after 2 minutes, specifically because of how hot it is. Now I run into a problem. Because I'm showing you guys how you can make these vambraces yourselves, I have to revert back to how I did them a long time ago, which is I wax the piece and put the straps on as fast as I can before I form it and let it set. This means I have to move the camera in order to film it as soon as it comes out of the wax, so I can get enough time to properly form it. This means that not only was my piece in the wax for 3 minutes when I thought I should pull it after 2, as we know, it also has some moisture content. These days I let it cool, I mount the straps, then I put it in an oven for around 10 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius, and then it's pliable enough that I can form it. It's a lot easier and safer and allows me to use brass dome head rivets, but it also makes your oven possibly unusable if you're not careful. Or even if you are careful. As soon as you have all the rivets set, it's time to immediately form the piece. You may want some gloves depending on how fragile your hands are. And if it's coming out of the oven, it'll be really hot. This was warm, but it wasn't excruciatingly so. It may take some time for you to get the form right, not too much. But if you've got it how you like it and you have space in a deep freeze, maybe throw it in there for a bit. Otherwise, double check it every so often to make sure it hasn't changed shape on you. It's good to sand the edges just to make sure it's perfectly smooth, because this is where the most blisters will come from if you're fighting in this. Get it to like a glass-like polish. Use really fine sandpaper, sanding blocks, whatever you can. It might be easier to do this if you try the oven method, since it'll be perfectly flat and a lot easier to sand constantly until you get it perfectly smooth. Now it's time to show you the results of our moisture and super high wax temperature. So you can tell right here that it's been just crisped right up. It's even split the leather. That'll be super hard, but also super brittle. We don't want that. Hold on a second, don't we have an elbow kicking around here somewhere? Yeah, let's put the elbow on. It's pretty simple. Mark a couple spots for your holes on the elbow, or mark a couple spots for your holes on the vambrace, depending on how you're doing it. Then we're going to use paracord. We're going to make the tip into a needle with a lighter. There's a video here on my channel about how to do that. And then you may need to use some pliers to get it through certain parts of the holes. Don't use the pliers too much, you don't want to break your needle. I use the same paracord needle technique for when I'm lacing lamellar plates together. Once you've got it nice and snug, you're going to tie off the end and cut it. Then you're just going to hit it with a lighter until it's nicely melted, and that's about it.
Well, that's about it, everybody. Another video in the bag. If you combine this vambrace pattern with the elbow design I did, you can see the link here, then you've got yourself a pretty good set of arm protection. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button. And until next time, keep on being creative in whatever it is you do.